Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the City of St. John's and St. John's City Hall. On behalf of City Council, I'm pleased to welcome some very special guests to City Hall this morning. We have, representing the Government of Canada, the Honourable Philippe Champagne, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities. We also have the Honourable Seamus O'Regan, Minister of Veterans Affairs and Member of Parliament for St. John's South, Mount Pearl. And the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador, the Honourable Dwight Ball. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to the MPs that are here today, along with the MHAs, Nick Whalen and a number of MP Nick Whalen and MP Van Jones and MP Ken MacDonald, number of MHAs that are here today, as well as members of St. John's City Council who are here and staff of St. John's City Council. I would also like to thank the federal government and the provincial government for inviting me to host this important announcement that will bring many benefits to municipalities across our province. I would now like to introduce the Honourable Seamus O'Regan to deliver introductory remarks on behalf of the Government of Canada.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, everyone. Premier, Nick, Yvonne, MHAs, ministers. It is such a pleasure for me to introduce my colleague and my friend, Philippe Champagne. It's not the first time he's been to the province. I think it was back in February that we visited the Marine Institute and a number of business owners there. And I know I told you then, and I know you saw it firsthand, but I'm going to keep repeating it until every one of my federal colleagues is repeating in their sleep. We have an abundance of raw talent in this province, and I know you see that. We live in a province where so many people want to live, want to work, want to create new wealth. This place has always been home to traders and exporters and artists and athletes working against the water and working against the weather. And for this province to thrive, we know that it's our responsibility as a government to be there to help. We need to be a government that creates spaces to foster innovative work. Faculties, laboratories, places where they can create, and then pathways to bring those products to market. And it might seem a bit boring to some, infrastructure. Our roads, our laboratories, our theaters. But infrastructure is the backbone of our communities. It is an essential investment in our economy. And already, our government is responsible for the largest infrastructure investment in Newfoundland and Labrador's history. The largest infrastructure investments in Newfoundland and Labrador's history. Because we're heading into an election year, I'm going to pull a Joey Smallwood and repeat it again. The largest infrastructure investment in our province's history. Since 2015, we have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into provincial investment in provincial infrastructure projects. We have put $100 million into Munn's new science building alone. On top of that, we've invested $110 million in more than 220 drinking water, storm, and wastewater projects across the province. $28.5 million into high-speed internet for rural communities across the province. $22 million for Team Gushu Highway. $45 million for the Trans-Labrador Highway, a road that transformed Happy Valley Goose Bay where I grew up, and I remember that very well. $2.6 million to repave and widen portions of Topsail and Black Marsh Road. $1.5 million to replace the Cornerbrook Main Street Bridge. $1.9 million for arts and culture centres right across our province, including replacing those 50-year-old seats at the St. John's Arts and Culture Centre. My God, they're 50 years old. $7.5 million into the Labrador Wellness Centre, over $1 million into the St. John's Farmers Market, and just recently $3.7 million to build a new home in Cowhead for the Grossmorn Theatre Festival. We announced that new theatre in Cowhead just last week with the Premier, and we were there when Jeff Pitcher of Theatre Newfoundland and Labrador made the comment that the artists didn't need the building to create the art. They'd do that anywhere. The new building for him was a sign of respect. a clear and tangible sign of support and commitment from the people of this province that who they were and what they did and where they did it mattered. And that support and commitment meant so much, he said. He said it would push them to do even greater and better work. There's a lot to that. There's a lot to what Jeff had to say there. Federal money for infrastructure is about more than roads and bridges and broadband. It's about much more than that. It's real support for our shared commitment, our commitment to building a stronger Newfoundland and Labrador, because a stronger Newfoundland and Labrador means a stronger Canada. So, Minister Champagne, that's what this means to us. That's what this means to us. This is a clear and tangible sign of support and commitment to the people of this province, that who we are and what we do and where we do it matters. And that support and commitment means a lot, and it will push us to do even greater and better work to build a stronger Newfoundland and Labrador, and therefore a stronger Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a man who gets it. Trust me, I sit around the cabinet table with this man, and he gets it. The Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, François-Philippe Champagne.
I think that today we're talking about an historic investment in people and communities. There is nothing short than an historic moment today. I think out of memory, I can say that this is the largest investment we've done in infrastructure in Newfoundland and Labrador. But before I start with the passion that you would expect from a minister who brings good news across Canada, let me say hello to my fellow MPs. Ken McDonald, which is here. Ken, I just saw you a minute ago. You're just there. You're tall enough that I should recognize you, Ken. Yeah, you know, we have something in common. Yvonne Jones, which is always with us as well, a great voice for the province, and Nick Whalen. And I must say, thank you all for being here, because this is team effort. If we're here today, Premier, as you will know, it's because we work together. We work together as a team, we work together as a caucus to deliver for the good people of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I want to acknowledge them, because obviously Seamus has the voice of the province in Ottawa, but I know it's a team effort. And I also want to say thank you, Mayor, for hosting us. You know, I've become the best friend of all mayors across Canada. I don't know why, but every mayor tells me we like you, but we like you even more now, Minister. So thank you for welcoming us in beautiful St. John's. Minister Crockett, Minister Hawkins, Minister Moore, and Minister Osborne. Hopefully I forgot no one, because Premier Ball is after me to make sure that if I forgot anyone, Premier Ball will do a great job of lifting everyone up, and mentioning also the Member of Parliament, you know, that are here with us today. It's not every day that you get to come to St. John's to announce hundreds of millions to improve the lives of peoples and communities. This is historic in that sense that today's an investment in people. Infrastructure is about people. It's not only about bridges and roads and wastewater treatment. It's about improving the quality of life of people. And I come from a rural background. And I can tell you infrastructure means different things to different people. If you live in the urban area, you're thinking perhaps about roads and bridges. If you're like me coming from Shawinigan, you're thinking about connectivity. You're thinking about things that will make a difference in rural settings. So I just want to say thank you again, Seamus, for that great introduction. As you know, I'm thrilled to be here in St. John's with you, Premier Ball. Actually, I must confess to all of you, and I know the cameras are rolling, I love St. John's. I also have to acknowledge, I'm also a friend of the Premier, which I appreciate very much. And I must say I'm a fan of Minister Reagan. And this started way before he was minister, by the way. So I must say that the two of you make a great team. And I think ministers, the provincial minister, I think I've made some other friends this morning as well, you know, coming here to announce that. But honestly, being in St. John's is always special in many, many ways. I've not been Minister of Infrastructure and Communities for too long, but I can tell you I'm very impressed by the people I've met and the projects that I've seen which are making a difference in the lives of people. I've been very grateful to visit St. John's before as International Trade Minister, as you know, Premier, I've always been a fan of your province. Always understanding that Newfoundland and Labrador was not at the tip of Canada, was at the center of all our trade agreements. Actually, Seamus reminded me yesterday that as I'm going to Saskatoon after, you can imagine his influence, because I was going to Saskatoon this morning. He convinced me from Shawinigan to go to St. John's, go to Saskatoon, was the easiest way to get there. I must confess that this is true friendship. But I must say that what Seamus was saying is that actually a flight from St. John's to Heathrow is about the same distance as a flight to St. John's to Toronto. And it's just to say again, taking my former hat, how much I believe, Premier, that your province is at the center of what we're trying to achieve as government. Not only on the trade file, but today, obviously, on infrastructure. And I do think that I have the best job of all, because my job is to improve people's quality of life across our country. And we can do that with infrastructure, because we know that infrastructure attracts talent. We know that infrastructure attracts investment. You just need to travel around the world and you'll see why people invest. It's because they have modern infrastructure. Like I said, I am from Shawinigan, another small town in Canada. And I know the difference that infrastructure investments can make in the health and well-being of a community. Actually, the first announcement I made was $10,000. I think that was the smallest announcement of an infrastructure minister, I was told, by the civil service. Because I said a small amount in a small community can make a big difference. But today, the good news in Newfoundland and Labrador, we're talking about big numbers. We're talking about things that bringing the infrastructure of this province to the next century. Because we know that infrastructure will bring greener communities, will bring communities that are more socially inclusive, and also that we will have the transit and the infrastructure that are needed, obviously, to make a difference. And because these investments in the project will make a real and tangible difference in the lives of people. We all know it, having modern, reliable infrastructure boosts trades and investments. We know it, and that's why I was so pleased, because I see the connectivity between trade and infrastructure. Because that also is going to create good jobs and help our middle class. There's a link with all that. We're opening up market, we're giving ourselves the infrastructure we need, we're creating jobs, we're helping the middle class. That's the equation we're doing here today. That's why our government is delivering on our commitment to make historic investment in infrastructure. For those of you who have not heard it, our plan of over 12 years of investment will see $180 billion flowing into communities across Canada. I would say this is probably historic in our nation. Not only historic here, Premier, in your great province, but also in the country. We are investing in roads and bridges so that people can move more freely, efficiently, and safely. And we know that we need infrastructure to move our goods to market. And we know that this is a great province like Newfoundland and Labrador. I see always, Premier, I said, a bright future. Every time I'm here, I can only say that, and I was with Minister Reagan this morning, talking again about the opportunities. It starts with people. But with people, with infrastructure, then we get markets. And I'm a firm believer that you've got everything, Premier. We want to make our communities greener. Our kids understand it. We understand it. And we want to be more digitally connected. We are investing in reliable high-speed internet services to give you better access to healthcare, education, and government services. And to make it easier for you across Newfoundland and Labrador to connect with friends across the province, across the country, and across the world. We also want to foster a sense of belonging in our country made of people of all backgrounds. And in this province, I'm reminded, you've showed the world what it is to be Canadian. You've shown the world what it is to be a Newfoundlander and Labradorian. Everyone in the world, and I travel quite a bit, always remember Gander. And it's because of you all. So we're investing in new community and cultural centers to make sure that the community that brought together the best out of people, can continue to drive and be together among friends, colleagues, and families. In Newfoundland and Labrador alone, Minister Reagan mentioned it. Infrastructure Canada has approved over 300 projects, Premier, in the past 3 years alone. This is quite significant, worth more than $846 million of projects in joint funding with the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I can tell you there's no greater pleasure to work with Premier Ball with the provincial government, with ministers who understand that our primary focus is people. This morning, it's all about people. Is how can we work together? And I have to commend Premier Ball when we talked on the phone and said we need to get that done. We understood each other. It was about people. Delivering now to make sure that we have a more prosperous future in Newfoundland and Labrador. For example, to the Clean Water and Wastewater Fund, Harbour Grace is upgrading the water dam at the Barnum Lake to improve the flow of the water to the city system, to ensure that local residents and local businesses have access to clean, clear, and safe drinking water. Here in St. John's, not Premier, I'd say now to your worship, in the Public Transit Infrastructure Fund, we are helping to improve the transit system, making sure that we have more wheelchair accessible transit points and shelters, because we want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to get to where they want to be and need to be. And I think it's through investments like that that we have made these because we have been engaging with the province, with the municipalities, Mayor, you would agree, and territories and Indigenous people, understanding the need. This is a bottom-up approach. What you're going to see today is about making sure that what we're doing fits what the people of Newfoundland and Labrador need and fits what the people, for example, of St. John's need. And that's why I'm here today with my Newfoundland and Labrador colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to announce that we have reached a long-term funding agreement that will see the Government of Canada provide more than $555 million in federal infrastructure funding to communities across the province over the next 10 years. $550 million. I was joking with the Premier before that we made sure it was above $500 million. Knowing the Premier, that's why we went to $555 million, making sure that, it's more than $500 million that we're going to looking over the next 10 years with the Premier and his team to deliver for the people. This agreement will support 4 priorities that matter to people, Premier. Green infrastructure, we all get it now. Community, cultural, and recreational infrastructure, rural communities, and public transit. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an historic moment we are all witnessing. This, in my view, Premier, team, ladies and gentlemen, has the potential to really be transforming for the province. And we're pleased to be part of it. We believe that these developments will help us achieve the vision we have for Canadian communities. Communities that have cleaner air and water and are resilient to the impacts of climate change. Communities that have better access to cultural and public spaces to promote our diversity and bring us together. And remote and northern communities that have better transportation, more digital infrastructure, and improved energy security. Having the best possible infrastructure is how we ensure the long-term prosperity of all Canadians. In conclusion, my friends, let's seize the moment. Let's be ambitious, and let's build together modern, resilient, green infrastructure for the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you, Mayor Breen, and to your councils and your councillors that are joining us here today. As Minister Champagne has already said, we have a great representation here from our MHAs and from our MPs and our cabinet members, but it's also important to see such a turnout of your councillors. With a name like Minister Champagne, and you show up announcing some $555 million, I guess, there's a celebration about that. But I will, before I begin, I want to go back to a point in time, which was a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, the first time that I met now Minister Champagne was at a convention that we were attending, and he talked about openly, so I will not adjust the mics here, but at that time he was actually hosting a webcast that was going across Canada, and he was the host of that show, and I can tell you I was the shortest of that group because I was in the middle of Stephen McNeil and Brian Gallant and McLaughlin at that time. So you can imagine All of these guys are well over 6 foot tall. That discussion went. But we had a great day. But I also knew at that point then that this was someone that had a passion for Canada. And as we had many more discussions since, and we shared the story of Newfoundland and Labrador from my perspective and from the perspective of our MPs, I will tell you, whether it was trade we were talking about or infrastructure more recently that we were talking about, this is a guy, as Seamus said, that gets it. He understands the impact on people and infrastructure, of course, strengthening our communities, supporting business development, and creating new jobs is important. And it's a priority for us, and it's a priority that you share with us. So welcome, and it's always nice to see you visit, even when you're coming, but in particular when you come with money, it's important. But the number of times that we have met over the past, either discussing things like the Atlantic Growth Strategy or through the Council of Federation, he's been there as a champion for Newfoundland and Labrador, so thank you. As Seamus had said just a few months ago, you joined us at our technology summit that was held. I said then, when I was talking about the minister, how accessible he's been and how he understands and supports our province. And of course, with this announcement today, it's just a continuation of the work that we've been able to do together. To Mayor Breen and to the councillors, it is always a pleasure to be here, and I really want to say thank you for the work that you do too, because when you look at politics, and I know in my own family, my brother's a mayor in a small community, I know it's the work that mayors and their councillors do, that it's, you guys are usually the first stop of issues as they start marching their way up that ladder that lands in provincial offices and then eventually in federal offices as well. So I really appreciate the relationship that we have with you and your council. Just about an hour or so, an hour and a half ago, we were at East Point Elementary and to kick off what is really the beginning of a school year. And you want to see, you think this guy was energized, enthusiastic. We just left the school with a bunch of kids, I can tell you, they were having quite the time. I had the opportunity to sit and do some reading and meet with some of the staff there who do a remarkable job. But we went there simply, this is really day 2 for that school, but really to talk about, as we talk about investments in infrastructure today, it's important that we invest in education, and some of the work that we've been doing with our minister and investment into the Premier's task force, improving the outcomes. I don't need to remind everyone that just a few years ago this province was in a much different position than it is today. Financially, it was precarious for us. We had a project, the Muskrat Falls project, that was creating quite a number of challenges. But we're getting there, and we're getting there simply because we foster and strengthen partnerships because of hard work at every level. One of the things with M&L, as he represented us here today from M&L, having a Premier's Leadership Forum, where many of the initiatives that we talk about in infrastructure really comes out of the priorities that from those discussions with our communities. Just a few years ago, the difference right now is reducing a deficit of some $2 billion. It's making a difference. Those partnerships are making a difference. But improving our education system is an important component. Seamus talked about the core science building. That was provincial money at the time that had been pre-committed. And it was through discussions and that we had with our federal colleagues that we were able to replace what was or what would have been a $100 million requirement by the province and replace that with federal money because we were able to work together to change the criteria. That's what you do when you go looking for $100 million. We've seen over $16 billion in the last year and a half of private investment coming to our province, and they are creating thousands of jobs, and many of you would know that list. But we've also taken the advantage of the time we have to invest in long-term care sites throughout this province, hospitals throughout this province. Of course, a priority for me is to replace the Waterford Hospital that was opened in 1855 when Canada wasn't even a country. So we were able to do that with the partnerships that we've had and laying the foundation for the future of our province through our way forward, which is growth and sustainability. So whether it's in mining, whether it's in offshore, and of course St. John's when you talk about being the center of the universe, when you look at the opportunity where we are with the oil and gas industry, where St. John's is with the oil and gas industry, we are starting to see the difference already. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a privilege for me to be here. Most importantly, it's a signal to the rest of Canada, a signal to the province that this is a province that's working strongly, and we have great partnerships with our federal colleagues, with the business community, and it is a province that is open for business. Already we've seen municipal infrastructure. We've advanced, as has been said already, quite a few projects. But how does this impact the city, the capital city? There's some 76 projects that has been announced since January of 2016. So 76 projects, nearly $200 million. So that's the kind of investment. Seamus didn't mention this, but we talked about core science. We've talked about this announcement today of over $500 million. And thank you for the 555. When I first landed on that, I said it's not a bad and for Crip. But nevertheless, just a few weeks ago, we had some over $949 million, which is investment in people as well. Much of the infrastructure, as has been said already, is investing in people. But when you look at educating people, when you're looking at giving young Newfoundlanders and Labradorians the opportunity to upskill and find better, well-paying jobs for them. Just a few weeks ago, some $949 million is what that was all about, and will impact some 13,000 workers in our province. Those are the students. As I say, when you invest in education today, really what you're doing is investing in jobs of the future. So thank you very much for getting this agreement finalized. We've had, I've got to say, when it comes to accessibility, flexibility in negotiating their agreements with our federal colleagues, $555 million is indeed an historic day. And with announcements like this, I will tell you, if it is in public transit and green infrastructure, has been mentioned already, which gives us a fair amount of room to deal with some of the issues that we're dealing with today. Recreation centers in rural and northern communities, as we have members here today that understand. And just last Friday, they were on the coast in Labrador to announce some new ferries, both on the Straits and indeed to the North Coast. And they've been a long time coming. Those decisions have been, people have been looking for those kinds of investments, and indeed we're able to get those agreements finalized as well. So thank you very much. We will now go to work in getting some projects and applications up your way so that we can indeed invest in Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and indeed in the communities that they live. And I share very much the enthusiasm that you bring with us today from Ottawa, and make no doubt about it that this is this province has a very bright future, and I look forward to working with you and your staff and working with our communities in the future for more and better days like the one we're having here today. So thank you very much. It's great to see you. Bye-bye.